Well, hello and welcome again to Rare Classic Cars. It's another cold weekend here in the Midwest, which means we're out on the porch talking about some vehicle or engine or best of, worst of, something like that. So today we're going to talk about a seminal car in modern automotive history, one that changed the direction of vehicles for at least the next decade, and that's the 1977 Chevrolet Caprice Classic and Impala. Now, bear in mind, this vehicle came out and was significantly shorter, almost a foot shorter than its predecessor, 700 pounds lighter, at a time when gas prices had decreased significantly versus what they were in 1973 during the OPEC oil embargo. And yet, it's one of those rare times in automotive history where everything seemingly comes together to hit an absolute home run. So let's talk more about the design, engineering, marketing of the vehicle, what it's like to own one, and the people behind it as well. I hope you enjoy this little video vignette, and feel free to put a comment in the comment section if you do, and like the videos. That helps the YouTube algorithm serve it up to more people just like you. Until next time, take care and enjoy this video on the 1977 Caprice Classic and Impala. Well, today we'll talk about one of the rare times when product planning, design, and engineering combined to deliver an absolute home run in the automotive world. The 1977 full-size Chevrolets, the Caprice and Impala. Conceived in the shadow of the 1973 OPEC oil embargo, Project 77, as it was called internally, had a goal of reducing size and weight while retaining style, comfort, and roominess, all while delivering improved fuel economy for full-size vehicles. The end result for Chevrolet division was a vehicle that sold almost double that of the previous year's predecessing model and ended up nearly a foot shorter and 700 pounds lighter, all while delivering similar, if not better, interior roominess in a number of dimensions and providing the interior space that customers still expected from full-size vehicles while being a considerably smaller exterior package. From an engineering standpoint, the 1977 Chevrolets share some common heritage, believe it or not, with a few seminal vehicles in automotive history, including the DeLorean as well as the Vixen motorhome. And that common heritage is none other than Bill Collins, who was a project manager on Project 77 for the corporation. Seen here at the far right in a photo taken with Bill Porter, Pontiac's then exterior styling chief, John DeLorean, and Steve Malone, Pontiac's then chief engineer, Bill Collins was Pontiac's assistant chief engineer, then chief engineer, before being appointed to lead Project 77 for the corporation. Bill was the chief engineer during the formative years of Project 77 and was even responsible for agreeing to switch many of the various items in the vehicle over to the metric system, often highlighted in the fasteners by blue bolts under the hood, denoting metric sizes versus standard sizes. After a few years, Bill left to join John DeLorean, whom he knew from Pontiac, and was the early chief engineer for the DeLorean motor vehicle. From a design standpoint, the exterior styling of the 1977 Chevrolet fell to Chevrolet Exterior 1 studio head Don Lasky, who remained in charge of this studio for many years, at least 15, maybe 20 years to my best knowledge. To that point, Don later led the exterior styling for the Cavalier, Monte Carlo SS, and even the 1988 Corsica and Beretta. However, the 1977 Chevrolet arguably represents Don and Chevrolet Exterior Studios' most daring departure from the past, namely taking the rounded, curved, heavy tumble home styling from the previous generation Chevrolet and turning it into something patterned arguably off of the 1976 Seville's design direction, which GM internally called the sheer look. This sheer look eschewed traditional rounded forms in favor of more hard-line creases, similar to the crease in the middle of a man's pair of slacks, arguably to the point where the only round forms on this 1977 Chevrolet's exterior are the wheel arches. The angular styling on the 1977 Chevrolets was not only a radical departure from the past, but also allowed the interior packaging engineers to afford passengers more space due to the fact that the sheet metal no longer had to curve significantly inward from the midsection of the body to the top of the roof panel. And the design form language set by the 1977 Chevrolets was used for many years within General Motors and on many different cars of myriad sizes, including the X cars, A cars, C cars, H cars, arguably a bit too long beyond its useful life, as other automakers, including Ford, introduced much more rounded forms again in the 1980s with the Taurus and Sable. While Don Lasky's team headed up the design for the exterior, John Shetler was the interior chief designer for the 1977 Chevrolets, and he also, similar to Bill Collins, had some Pontiac in his blood, having done the second generation or 70s era into the early 80s Firebird interiors. As the design and engineering teams worked together, they put together a series of vehicles that was materially different from the predecessors in a number of ways. Number one, there were no hard tops after 1976, and these 1977 Chevrolets had to make do with just four-door sedan, two-door coupe, and station wagon variants. The coupes had a very unique rear glass treatment where the glass was draped over hot wires, enabling it to bend at roughly 90-degree angles to form its unique shape. This was very similar to a technique that was used on the Tornado XSR of the time as well. On the station wagon front, the beloved clamshell tailgate was dropped in favor of a three-way tailgate that could swing open or drop down as a tailgate, and it was arguably more practical than the clamshell design. And while all of the variants of the 1977 Chevrolet were more compact than what they replaced, they arguably didn't look it when customers saw them in the showroom. The sheer look angular styling added much more height to the vehicles and made them seem visually taller than the cars that they replaced, allowing them to still appear substantial in spite of losing 11 inches in length, as the overall length went from 223 inches down to 212, and the wheelbase shrunk from 121.5 inches to 116 inches. With the OPEC embargo now in the rearview mirror, Chevrolet marketing had a tough task to try to convince people that this was the right car for the right time when fuel prices had already dropped significantly since 1973. The early marketing campaign employed Jerry Orbach, later of Law & Order fame, who highlighted that the new Chevrolet had 5 more interior cubic feet than the predecessing generation. And interestingly, in many of the ads, the car's interior space was touted as being greater in almost every dimension, as well as the trunk space, and the way that they phrased the car's compactness relative to the previous model was that it was more manageable, not that it was shorter. With fuel prices relatively low and their new models not yet coming out for another year, Ford deployed an aggressive marketing campaign called Kick the Habit, which urged customers to go into the showroom and test drive the Ford and check it out and compare it to the Chevrolet, as it had many features that full-size car buyers arguably still wanted, including size and heft. Needless to say, Ford's marketing campaign really didn't have many customers kicking the habit and finding Ford dealerships, especially given that in 1977, Chevrolet sold about 660,000 of these full-size Caprices and Impalas versus 350,000 in the previous year. It was easily classified as a home run for Chevrolet division, and the car won numerous accolades, including Motor Trend Car of the Year, as well as accolades from magazines like Consumer Guide. While the car was indeed shorter, and that might have been challenging for some people to digest, once they got inside and saw the amount of roominess the new 1977 Chevrolets had, the buyer was often sold, in part because the car was genuinely more manageable and, to be honest, drove better than its predecessor as well. Under hood, there were 3 engine choices available, including a 4.1-liter 250 cubic inch 6-cylinder, a 5-liter or 305 cubic inch V8, making 145 horsepower, and a 5.7-liter, 350 cubic inch V8 making 170 horsepower, the lone carryover powertrain versus the prior years. While each of these engines was durable as well as reliable, unfortunately, some of them found themselves in front of a transmission that was new to the full-size Chevrolets that was anything but reliable, and that was the turbo-hydromatic 200 transmission. This transmission was a lighter version of the turbo-hydromatic 350 with many different internals as well as externals, and just did not have the reliability that customers came to expect from full-size General Motors vehicles and turbo-hydromatic 350 and 400 transmissions. While the transmission was arguably a weak point from an engineering perspective, the 1977 vehicles did employ a lot of sound engineering, to the point that if you drive them, they are very, very pleasant to drive with low road noise, low wind noise, and overall very good interior comfort, particularly for their size. One little known package that greatly improved the handling even over the standard car, whose handling was improved over the predecessor, was what was called the F41 suspension package, which included a thicker upfront anti-roll bar as well as a rear stabilizer bar and stiffer shocks as well as springs. This F41 suspension allowed the full-size Chevrolet to pull over 0.8 Gs on the skid pad at a time where the car magazines were testing vehicles like the Porsche 911 that were pulling about 0.78 Gs. That's right, these 1977 full-size cars could pull more Gs on the skid pad than some contemporaneous sports cars of the time, including Porsches. One might even argue that overall the 1977 full-size cars, and the Chevrolets in particular, were so good that they lasted all the way until the 1990 model year before being replaced in 1991 with a car that went back to much more rounded forms and different design language, the 1991 Caprice. Over that time, it is interesting to watch as the sheet metal's creases in the Caprices and Impala become progressively dull as the dies and various components made to make the sheet metal started to wear out more and more. If you don't believe me, take a look at a 1977 Impala or Caprice and then compare it with the sheet metal creases on a late 80s model and you'll see what I'm saying. However, with regard to the ownership experience, I can say that these cars are very pleasant to own, quite reliable, great to drive, comfortable. It's really hard to fault them outside of some minor niggles like the ergonomics not being overly great. This was the first time where Chevrolet had switched to having the dimmer switch on the steering column versus as a foot-operated button, and it took a considerable reach of fingers to get the dimmer switch to activate, and some of the controls weren't necessarily laid out all that well, including the power window switches, which, for whatever reason, GM enjoyed putting low and at the front of the door panels as opposed to on an armrest or somewhere that was easily accessible to a driver or passenger. From a reliability standpoint, there's not much to worry about on these vehicles. The engines under hood are very sound. The transmissions are really the weak point, as I mentioned, whether that's the 200 or the improved, but still can be problematic, 200 R4 in later years. The rear ends, particularly the 10 bolts, are very robust and reliable. So the overall ownership experience of these vehicles can be very good. And for somebody looking to get into the classic car hobby at an attractive price point, whether you pick a Chevrolet, Caprice, or Impala, or one of its platform mates, the Pontiacs, Buicks, and Oldsmobiles, you should overall have a great and enjoyable experience. I hope this video shed a bit more light for you on the Caprice as well as the Impala, and also is a bit of encouragement for those of you thinking about getting in the classic car hobby to find and start off with something like this. I'll call it a low-dollar collectible that can really put a smile on your face. Thanks again for watching. Thanks again for watching this video vignette, I guess we'll call it, on the 1977 Chevrolet Caprice and Impala. If you like this video, please be sure to click the like button and comment, as that helps the YouTube algorithm serve it up to more people like you. And if you haven't yet subscribed, click the circular icon of the 67 Buick Riviera at the top left and check out a few of the video thumbnails for videos that YouTube recommends for you. Thanks again for watching, and until next time, take care.